All right, little bit of a surprise video today because we're going to look very freshly at the Q4 2024 earnings presentation that Perlabiz brought out last night, Korean time. And the reason that I want to keep this fresh is because honestly, EVE Online had a fantastic quarter. All right, even though there are some massive changes about this report and the implications of it, which I also want to mention and discuss in a short, quick analysis video. So again, Q4, Perlabiz is the parent company of EVE Online, right? They bought CCP Games many years back, and they're now the owners of CCP Games, and debatably have influence over the development of EVE Online and certainly the business outcome of EVE Online. And their two big IPs are Black Desert Online, a Korean game, but also popular in the West, very, very big. And then secondly, also EVE Online, and then whatever is new in the development pipeline, which we'll talk about here in a second as well. But I want to start with the big news. And the big news is that quarter over quarter and year over year, Black Desert had a fantastic quarter. All right, you can't deny that. You can see that here. They had revenues of 95 billion won, and that means that they had around 20% quarter over quarter revenue increase, and they had, even if you look at the entire year, they had a 2% year over year revenue increase. So they kind of pulled it out on Q4. On the surface, that looks fantastic. Right? On the surface, it looks fantastic. They have reasoning here. The reasoning, they're saying, okay, they have a 10th anniversary event going on in Black Desert Online, and in EVE Online they had 2 expansions. Let's not talk about those. But they also had EVE Vanguard is what they mentioned here. I don't think EVE Vanguard had a lot of impact on the revenues, but again, it's new stuff to talk about, which they like to do in front of analysts because it represents future growth, and it's really just it's distracting from the actual stuff, I would say. And then they're talking about what's coming. They specifically mentioned Crimson Desert, and they're talking about specifically about EVE Frontier, that they have the Founders Access pack launch. Again, that's not a big impact on the revenues right now, but it's talking about future announcement. Crimson Desert is their big new IP that is coming out soon, TM. They have moved this thing 5 times already. They're now want to launch it towards the end of 2025. Don't hold your breath, but if they move it again, it's going to be, I think, a massive disappointment for investors, because they are putting a lot of their focus on and their hopes on the development of Crimson Desert and a successful launch there. Now, let's look at the interesting stuff. Operating income, okay? Now, the operating revenue is up. We already said that. If you look at the operating profit, for the first time in a long time, they had a significant operating profit, or something to write home about. Operating profit means the profit they're actually making from video games, all right? Because it's their core business, not stuff like investments, foreign exchange stuff, not any of that stuff. Specifically making, distributing, selling video games, okay, and subscriptions to their games, and so that's a good thing. Okay, although it's a slight positive, but it's a turnaround. So first of all, that's good. If you look at the net profit overall, you can see that's a massive 46 billion won. And so you're going, why is that? It's not coming from video games. What that is, and we've seen that a lot in the last years, where they turned around a negative performance on video games with investment income. Now, in this analyst call, they specifically mentioned things like FX or revaluation of assets, and in the past they've talked about earnings from crypto investments. So they have obviously have a very successful financial arm and investment arm of the company, but this is very worrying in the long term, because their core business is video games. If they don't manage to get a profit out of making video games, then they're not going to be successful in the long run, and the market is not going to like that either. So that's but bottom line is they made a net profit in Q4, so their shareholders are going to be happy about that. Now, this is the big one. We used to have for the longest time, a breakdown between the different IPs. We knew exactly how much revenue they were making from EVE Online and how much money they were making from Black Desert. That is gone. We don't have that anymore. And that is terrible for us because we cannot see anymore how much revenue EVE Online is making. You can see that they made more money. We already know they made more revenue in the last quarter, but we don't know where it's coming from. We just know that 91 billion of the 95 billion is coming from video games, all right? Games, because they say it in the legend here. But somebody asked this question in the analyst call, and the answer was, well, it's about the same ratio as the last quarter. And Crota, you guys all know him. He has the Markets for ISK blog at marketsforisk.blogspot.com, and he's a very active member and supporter of our community here. He actually went ahead and used that assumption that the ratio hasn't changed to map out the revenue in a graph, and you can see that would mean that this would have been the best quarter ever for EVE Online, with a massive 25 billion Korean won in revenue. And that is huge news, because if you look at Reddit, if you look at player sentiment, you would absolutely think that this game is dying. People are not happy, but that is only one aspect. The other aspect, and you can't ignore it, is the financial success of EVE Online, right? And EVE Online had a massively successful Q4. And yes, Sincline says it in chat here. Of course, they had massive sales. In November, it's Black Friday. We had NCT sales, we had Plex sales, we had Extractor sales. So all of those sales mean that a lot of Plex was used up. We know there's not a lot of Plex left in the system right now. And if a lot of Plex is used, then what that means is they're moving Plex from deferred revenue to the actual revenue column on the balance sheet or on the income statement. And so that means that having a lot of sales and getting a lot of Plex converted to Omega, converted to other in-game items, means that that is posted as revenue. And clearly those sales and at least a player base that is not dropping in player numbers have contributed to a massive quarter for EVE Online, and CCP is going to be very, very, very happy about it. And I'm not saying you should overlook all of the other things that are wrong with this game right now. I have a lot of videos in the last weeks that where I've outlined from the CSM Summit what I think is wrong with it, what we all think is wrong with the game right now, and that doesn't change this. But you have to keep this in mind. This is a big factor of video game development decision making, is whether the game is successful or not. And if you look at this revenue graph, you can see that clearly, and clearly part of this is going to be inflation, but even factored in for inflation, the game is not doing badly, right? Now, we don't know if CCP Games or EVE Online is profitable. Chances are they're not, because we're going to see their tax return coming out in April that we're going to analyze on this show as well, of course. But likely, because they're developing new games, for example, EVE Frontier, they're putting a lot of effort into there. Even though it's outside finance, they're still going to incur costs, etc., etc. They're likely not going to be profitable, but neither is Pearl Abyss, right? Video game companies typically, they're profitable because of new games. They're not profitable because of the old games. The old games keep the lights running, and they're happy if it's a break even or a slight profit. But they're all putting their money on new developments, which is EVE Frontier for CCP Games, and it is Crimson Desert for Pearl Abyss. Right? Now let's go back here, and we can see that again, the breakdown isn't there. Now, why aren't they breaking it down? You can be sure that this is not an oversight. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. This is very, very deliberate, and whenever they're not showing you data, it's because they're hiding something. That is 100% fact, okay? The only question is, what are they hiding? Now, if you look at Nosy Gamer's blog or Crota's blog, they're all speculating about it. What I would think is most likely is that Black Desert is not performing well. Black Desert is their prime IP, And if Black Desert is not doing well, which it hadn't been recently, then that is not a good thing. And that's going to have the biggest impact on the stock price. And that is their main focus from a business perspective. So they had a big launch in the end of 2024 in China for Black Desert, and possibly that that law or that launch just didn't go very well, and so that could be something. Also, if they're preparing possibly for a Crimson Desert launch, possibly it's too risky for them to break it out. Possibly they don't want to do that. That is another one of my theories that the others haven't mentioned yet. But in the end, only they know. They do have a new finance director, so who knows what he has in mind. Interestingly, though, last time we analyzed these numbers, we really wanted to have a look at the success or lack of success for Galaxy Conquest, right? And so we can't see any of that anymore. We can't see Eve Echoes. We can't see Galaxy Conquest. It's possible they're all doing terrible, and that's why they don't want to show the revenue for that IP. But I think it's more likely that this is about Black Desert, because Black Desert is just so much more important to them. And then, the rest of it is a breakdown for labor expenses, advertising expenses, etc., etc. Q4, they had very high advertising expenses, but that's nothing huge there. They increased labor cost. They actually did hire some people. No, they actually have fewer people now. They have higher labor costs but fewer people. Could possibly be related to some other forms of compensation. If you look at their the outlook, then we're just looking at, yes, new expansion packs and EVE FanFest. Honestly, their outlook looks a little bit like an EVE Online roadmap. No offense, Ratari, Swift, Convex, but this looks like your roadmap. Summer expansion in the summer and winter expansion in the winter. I guess, and yeah. Marketing and launch Q4 2025. I said that about Crimson Desert. They have to stick that landing in Q4 2025, or there's going to be all hell breaking loose. All right, that's the analysis of the Pearl Abyss numbers. Very exciting, great quarter for EVE Online, and we're going to return to the regular stream.